Now that you guys know how to navigate the 3D viewport and how to transform primitive objects, I'm going to show you the basics of the interface so that you aren't so overwhelmed when you start up the program. I'm not going to show you everything, but we're going to go over a few things and also make a couple tweaks to make the default settings a little bit easier for what we're doing for 3D printing. So first, what we're going to do is go up here to the file menu and go to user preferences to change some things in here. So we are going to change some things with the interface here. First, we're going to make the scale of everything a little bit larger. That'll make it a little bit easier for you guys to follow me, but it also make it easier for you guys to see all the menus. So I'm going to move that from 1 to 1.25. Okay, there is an editing section. You don't really need to change anything in here. There is an input section. From the previous video, you should have emulate numpad on. If you didn't have a 3-button mouse, you might want to click emulate 3-button mouse, but you do have a 3-button mouse. I'm just going to make this a little larger. In the add-on section, you can add on plugins to the program to add additional functionality. There's actually a bunch of plugins that come with Blender, and we're going to install one of them for 3D printing. So if you go here and you search for print, you need to check Mesh 3D Print Toolbox. Okay? Themes are just how Blender looks, and we are going to change the theme. I'm going to change the theme to default ++. You can change it to whatever you want to. If you want to change it back, you can press the reset to default theme button at the bottom. Default ++ makes it a little bit easier for you guys to see what I'm doing, so I'm going to change it to that theme. You can change it to that theme if you want to, or one of the other ones. A file, we're going to make one change here. We're going to change where the temp directory is in Blender. So if you click the little file icon here, you should have some system bookmarks here. You can click on Pi for your desktop, and then you go down to Our Projects, and then we are going to create a new folder. We're going to name this 3D Models. Okay, inside the 3D Models folder that you just now created, you're going to create another folder called Temp. Press Enter, and then you can accept that change. Okay, so now your temp folder, let's see, it should be 3D Models Temp. So let me click there, and then click on Temp, and then accept the change. Okay, you can leave the system settings alone as well for right now. All right, so when you open up the application, you see the default workspace. Blender has different workspaces set up to do different tasks. This is the default workspace that comes with the program, but there are other workspaces that you can get to by clicking here. You can see the default is here. Clicking this menu, you can jump over to the animation workspace, and you can jump over to the game logic workspace, or the video editing workspace, or the 3D view workspace, which just shows the 3D view. We're going to jump back over to the default workspace because that's the one that we're going to make some changes to. So all workspaces are made up of areas, and each area has an editor. So this workspace has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 editors. You can tell an editor by the little arrows at the top and the bottom of the area. So there's a little thumb thing there that looks like you can grab it with your thumb at the top and the bottom. Okay, so this area at the top has a information editor, and you can change the editor by clicking here. Okay, this is the 3D view editor. You can see it here, 3D view. Down here, we have a timeline editor. Here we have a properties editor, and here we have an outline editor, which shows you all the objects in your scene. Now, you can create new areas by dragging either at the top or the bottom of an area. So you can see these grips right here. If you drag over, you can just duplicate the area, and you can change the editor if you want to. So I could change this to a file browser editor if I wanted to. The way that you can combine an editor is by dragging in the same area where you can create editors, and then moving over. You see the giant arrow? That collapses the area. So even though the workspaces come with a default area setup, you can change any of the workspaces. And also in this drop-down menu, you could create more workspaces. So there's a plus sign right here, and also an X sign to delete workspaces. So you can delete any of the ones that are set up by default in Blender if you wanted to, or create your own. As I said, we're going to make some changes to this layout, our default layout, and then save our settings. So you don't need a timeline because we're not going to be doing any animation. So what I'm going to do is actually combine our viewport area with this timeline area to give us a little bit more space. So down here at the bottom of the viewport editor, I am going to drag down to combine. And now we just have the viewport editor, the outline editor, and the properties editor. And of course, the information editor at the top, which just gives us information about the things that are going on in our program. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is actually move this menu bar for the 3D viewport editor at the top, because it'll be a little bit easier to work with if it's at the top. So you're not looking down all the time to get to those menus. It's actually how it's set up in newer versions of Blender. So you can right click on the header for this editor and you can click on flip to top, okay? So now you don't have to look down there anymore to get to any of the menu functions or any of the buttons. The next thing I'm going to do is go over to the properties editor. Now, I'm not going to go over all the things that are in the properties editor, but I will show you one thing that we should change right now. So in the properties editor, there are different properties for Blender. What we're going to do is change some properties for the scene, and we're going to set this up specifically for 3D printing. So we need to change the unit of measure to millimeters and metric, and you'll see it says the unit scale is 0.001, okay? You might have noticed over here that the cube got smaller, and also the viewport changed a bit, but the checkers changed also. So we need to make a change over here in the viewport also, the way that the viewport is viewing the objects. To do that, we're going to open up the properties panel for the viewport. And you've seen this before. You press N for that to pop up. Okay, so down here, we are going to change our display. We're going to match our scale to our unit scale here. We're going to change our scale to 0.001, okay? And we're going to say 120, just because that's the size of the printer that we're using. But if you get a 3D printer, you can change it to whatever you want to. But our 3D printer is 120 millimeters by 120 millimeters, so that's what we'll use, okay? So we'll get 120 lines. All the way up here in the view section, we are going to change the N to 10,000, and that just allows us to zoom out more without the scene disappearing. All right, so I'm going to zoom all the way back in to our cube, and you notice now that it says the dimension of our cube is 2 millimeters in the X, Y, and Z direction, okay? One last thing I want to show you is the outliner, and this is something that we've mentioned in the previous video, has all the elements in our scene. We can create more than one scene by pressing plus, just like we can create more than one workspace. But for this scene specifically, it has all the elements. So we have the camera here, we have the cube, and we have the lamp. Okay, so now that we've made all those changes, what I want you to do is go up to File, and then go to Save Startup File, and just confirm by pressing Enter or just clicking on Save Startup File. You might want to also go to User Preferences and click on Save User Settings. Okay, so those are the basics of the interface. Next, what I'm going to do is show you how to make more complex changes to the primitive objects that you have access to within Blender by using the 3D Viewport's edit mode.